Mr. Vulnerability.
Man, doing good. It's Thursday. It is what it is. The weekend is coming.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I like to get things started with, a typical check-in on people's energy level as we begin the show to kind of make sure that we're in alignment on that level. So what would you say your energy level is today in this moment, being from zero being life sucks to 10 being life is awesome?
10, man. Life is awesome, man. Life is awesome. It's always awesome to me. Those circumstances don't look like it, but it's awesome because I'm breathing, right? Can't take that
Absolutely.
for granted. So that's definitely the awesome side of
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. As I'm glad you joined me on the show, man, because what we really want to talk about is how the new movement I'm advocating about spiritual capitalism can be used as a great tool to bring unity and love. And now let me explain spiritual capitalism for individuals who may be new to the term spiritual capitalism and may think it's an oxymoron, and I think it's even possible to bring spirituality to capitalism. So spiritual capitalism is a book. It's based on a book by Michael E Hendren, which is a philosophy that intimates the spiritual power of love combined with empowerment, liberation, and transformation with capitalism, quantum performance, productivity, and astute financial management. Basically, it's about managing the head and leading with the heart by integrating the power and intellect of the mind with the transformational power of love. So that's basically what spiritual capitalism is about. Now, I know most people can't really see the image behind me as clearly, but there's 10 commandments that pretty much dictate how spiritual capitalism is to be implemented. And I just really want to talk about the first one, which is define business as a spiritual experience. And when you do that, to me, I think it sets the context for how you go about doing your business and pretty much how you approach your business from the very beginning. And with that being said, brother, I wanted to kind of give you a chance to introduce yourself a little bit before we get into our discussion, because I'm curious to know, Mr. Vulnerability, and we're going to talk about how important vulnerability even plays a role in being a spiritual capitalist.
Yes, yes, definitely it plays a role in it. And not only just in that, it's just in life in general when we are able to embrace it and understand who we are, to who we truly are, and not on some deep level, but just the intrinsic level of who am I really? My thoughts, my patterns, my behaviors, my understanding of which past behaviors is promoting this new behavior that I'm doing. Those are the kind of things that I deal with in getting people in touch with their vulnerable side, so to speak. So I am Carl Shawn-Watkins of Carl Shawn-Watkins Consulting. I've been in business. I've been in business for a couple of years, but I've been doing my direct my direct teaching, coaching, consulting has been in vulnerability and leadership. So I coach and train CEOs and executives how to embrace vulnerability and leadership to boost pretty much their performance, build their relationships, and also their bottom line to increase productivity. So I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert. Like I said, with that emphasis on vulnerability and leadership. I'm also a law student that's emphasizing in business and corporate law as well as that. So through my career, I've had successful leadership roles in the public and the private sector. And I'm just really transforming the diversity, equity, and inclusion landscape. Through that vulnerability and leadership, it's pretty much what it's about. So, as the founder of my own LLC, I've even before then just historically promoted corporate cultures and sustainable business models. And that's definitely for the diverse and equity piece of the DEI that we don't too much talk about. So that's just me in a nutshell.
Well, thank you again for investing the time and energy and joining today's
No problem.
discussion. Because again, my goal is clear, and I just really want to reinstate it: is that I want to advocate for the implementation for business leaders who are conscious first that spiritual capitalism, I believe, is the ideology that we can adopt. And for folks who already may not necessarily call themselves by that term, but your actions and your behaviors may be exhibiting that, those are the people I want to bring on the show and have a discussion around different, I would say, common issues that we're in the common space in the media. And we're going to talk about one of those issues or several of those issues today, but we're going to first talk about um, Yee's or Ye's. I keep calling him Yee, yeah, you know. So let me be proper and say Ye. His comments that he made about the Jewish community, as well as his comments he made about George Floyd and he's made several other comments in the past about the Black community concerning slavery being a choice and those things. So, with that context being said, I just kind of wanted to bring you into this discussion, Carl. What are your thoughts about Ye and some of the comments he's made as it relates to the vulnerability aspect?
A lot of times, King, when we're talking and we're making these things, and oftentimes we find this a lot. I used to say this was pretty much an issue in the African American community, right? Where we really didn't, we really would lash out with a lot of things we didn't understand or get parts of things and just roll with them and not the clear understanding of how things came about. And I just want to say from the standpoint of that, I'm not here to advocate whether he was wrong or right in what he was saying. Every man has to stand on his own. Every man has to stand on what he says and what he believes in. But when you come and you bringing others in and it becomes a contradictory point, or you come to the point of even with your knowledge offending others, how can you win at that? And me being a spiritual person, when you look at the background of Jews and you look at the Jewish society in total, not to say about the Holocaust and those things was as egregious as happened to them, but I'm looking past those things. I'm looking at the original of it, right? Those are God's chosen people. So however we want to look at it is what they have their hands in or what they're touching or what the prospering is. God said they was prospering from the door. So when you look at that being the essence of it, I also look at them as being a portal for a lot of what we've done. I don't look at it as the fact that I'm making all of this and they in charge. I'm bringing all this to the forefront, and I'm looking at it as that where can you go and advocate for these kind of successes that these stars align themselves with, or even afforded to, especially on the financial piece of that. Where can you go and say, okay, you bring this idea, this structure, this dynamic, whatever it is that you're bringing to, and I'm going to take it to these white executives, and they're going to front me this money or do these kind of things to put me in their class, right? We're having a big problem about that right now when you're looking at the NFL and the NFL owners, right? That's the big boy club, and that is really the exclusive example of how we should see how we can't get in when they don't want us in.
Absolutely.
NFL really shows that, right? You got like 75% of the NFL is black players, and that does not ingratiate to how many we have in leadership there, how many we have as coaches there. I'll just go on that level first. How many black coaches do we have? Not to mention executives, and definitely no black owners.
Right.
So when you look at that avenue, they've shown you that we'll let you in when we want to let you in. That's really what they show me, right? So here you have the Jewish people, right, that have always been, to some extent, even before King March, even before that history part, they've been kind of like advocates for giving us a shot, right? Not that we didn't deserve it, not that we didn't own it with what we can do and bring to the table. That's always been the case. We've been making stuff ever since Africa and building those pyramids, right? So we always know we was doing, but all the time knowing what you're doing and getting the avenue to being able to do that is the difference that makes and breaks a lot of us. And I think they've been essential in giving and opening some doors for us. Just let's put it that way. Now, has there been some things taken off that we consider to be abuses? Yeah, most people in power will abuse people that's under them, right?
Absolutely.
Some kind of way. If it ain't egregious the way it brings attention to, it's working people too long and not, paying them enough compensation. It's rewriting a contract where you only get 30% instead of 50. Somewhere along the line, the abuses in power come out. It doesn't matter whatever you are. That's just human nature. So when you have these things and you have the avenues and such as Ye has had, especially over the years, especially being from Chicago, me as well, I know some of the struggles that we went through on the level of the kids in the street and drugs and gangs and violence. When you have these opportunities, I almost call it like a responsibility for you to leave that door open for someone else to come behind. And then saying a lot of things and speaking out a lot of things on these social media platforms, because they can get you caught up. You tend to say things that really creates obstacles for those who might want to come behind you, who's looking for someone looking like me to open the door so I can let my gifts and my purpose come behind you so I can create greater for my family of those. And when you have those kind of things going on, man, it's really hard to see.
Absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. And I just want to touch on a couple of points you made. I really think that, when it comes down to classifying any group of people, generalizing any group of people is wrong. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and I understand that he was in his emotions, he was in his feelings, and that's what I believe his agenda was. But by the same token, that's the whole point I want to point out behind the spiritual capitalism, that if you view business as a spiritual experience, then you understand that you are looking at your moves very strategically, similar to playing chess. If you really want to be a great chess player, you want to think 8 to 10 moves ahead. People say 6 to 7 moves. No, it's really 8 to 10 if you really want to understand. And I use that as a great metaphor for life. You got to think about what I'm going to say and how my actions are going to be impacted in today's society. And is it really valid to make a comment about an entire group of people when you say on one breath that you, as a black man, and we are the original Jews, and I understand, I've read historical books that point out that the original Hebrews were people of color as well. But then you can't say, on another hand, that all Jews are bad, because then you kind of include yourself in that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then we know there's Jews of color in Israel. We know there's Jews of color in Ethiopia. So when you're making that blanket statement, that shows that the lack of knowledge that you're showing. And to me, I think that if you're going to have a platform, you have to be very mindful of what you're saying, especially if you're a person that has influential ability, that a lot of people are going to listen to you. And the only reason I'm really talking about, and I wanted to have this discussion about him to set the context, was not so much about him as a person,
Yeah.
but the environment that he's created as a result of that has happened since he came out with those statements. Uh, because I watched one interview with him on there, now my YouTube, which is one of my main things that I love to watch. I love the educational benefits that YouTube provides. So I get a lot of my information from YouTube, from a context education, from different books, authors of books, and their different podcasts that they do. And the fact that now the energy is now comparing blacks against Jews. And so now that has become the energy that's being created, as to say, as you pointed out before, we're saying that because they didn't treat us in our minds as fairly as we should have felt, then they should be called out as being criminal or being wrong in that behavior. When if you look at just capitalism in general, and I see black business owners do it to each other, where we don't sit here and say, well, because you're black, I'm going to give you a fair deal and I'm going to look out for your best interest. It's up to you as a business owner to come to the table with the knowledge and the competence to say, I got to negotiate on my best interest. And sometimes if you're new to the game and you don't really bring much value to the table, I've learned that you got to take those initial learning steps, and maybe 3 or 4 years before you get the competence to realize, okay, I understand the game now. So now I can renegotiate my contract, and I can open, as you said before, I can begin to open pathways for others. And that's what I mean when I say viewing it from the initial context of business as a spiritual experience, that if you really want to see yourself as this revolutionary that he's advocating himself to be right now, or proclaiming himself to be right now, that 8 moves ahead would have been, well, I'm going to learn everything I can about the manufacture and distribution of athletic wear, so that I can learn that part of business, and then I can lift up others that come behind me so they can get into that game, as opposed to I'm going to burn all my bridges from all the relationships I've been able to build, and then I'm going to just bring energy and emotion and talk about what I'm going to do, and then you're not going to be in a position to even do much now because we're still not in that game.
And a lot of times, in the essence of that, my dad used to tell me as a young man, and African American men probably get these kind of talks and conversations from their fathers, because I know my dad had a lot of them with me, and what some of the things that I would face as being an African American male, and how people would perceive me, and how my actions or inactions would categorize me or put me in certain places and stigmas, right? When we look at those things, because he used to tell me all the time, never show your anger publicly. Like, you never want to get someone seeing you acting that way in public. It ain't had nothing to do with me not protecting myself or, those kind of things. But he just saying in dealing with people and you're not caring too much for how they're talking to you or those kind of things. He's like, it's always tactful ways to handle it, especially with you being a black man, because if not, you're going to be seen on the other side regardless, right? So
Right.
these are some of the conversations that, I grown up having with my father. So when I think of things on that, everything that we say, regardless of the wrongness of it, we can't verbalize it how we see it, right? Because the effect on us is going to be much greater than the effect on just case in point. You hear about the politicians and those kind of things they say. Some of the things they say are really just like mind blowing to me. Did you just say that to the reporter? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Really?
Right.
Like, this is what I'm thinking in my mind. But I'm seeing that no backlash is done to them. Nothing, people are still voting for them. You know what I'm saying? So I've already known that from my experiences that what I say takes on a different connotation than what Joe Blow or Mike John say. They're not gonna be put in no category, right? Because we had a president, so to speak. I ain't got to mention his name. Everyone who's watching know. That told numerous of lies, but he got
Right.
millions of votes. So you know what I'm saying?
Still
So
continue to lie.
let that have been on the flip side, right? And I'm just not advocating color here, but I'm just letting you know from a perspective of what we're talking about this conversation. When you see that, you can't operate out of emotion with these kind of things. You have to get on the facts. You have to put yourself in conversations where this can go on and you can kind of negotiate how you feel about things in conversations. That's how I deal with vulnerability. I can just come on and talk about, yo, you gotta be vulnerable. Nobody's trying to hear that. But I had to put in perspective. I had to put things together. I had to do research. I had to do all those. Why is it important? Why is it needed? Why is those kind of things? These are the conversations in which someone as you would think is powerful as Jay would kind of put itself in these conversations and say, okay, how can I get some good knowledge with this? And how can I articulate this to the fact that they don't see me as this just raging, angry black man talking about what I ain't got, or playing the victim as to they didn't took from me. Last I checked, I wasn't able to go to Adidas and put my name on those shoes and charge $500 for them. Now, I'm not knocking that he was able to do that. I'm not knocking that at all, and I'm not knocking the capitalism in which we live in, right? That
Right.
makes that available. But what I'm saying is, if they gave me that opportunity, I've got to be smart enough to say, how can I insulate myself where they can't push me out now?
Absolutely.
I can insulate myself where I can bring some of my family tree in and we start building with the little bit they didn't gave me, right? So
Right.
these are the things we have to teach, and these are the things that not only do we have to teach, but these are the things that we have to be self-aware with. And in vulnerability and leading with vulnerability, you are self-aware of those things. Where am I at? Like, what's the circumstances surrounding? What's my thoughts on those circumstances? Okay, how are my feelings in this? How can I get my feelings out of this? How can I go with reason and get results? These are the kind of things that I think a lot of times with stars, and this is no knock on him. I'm pretty sure it's much more that we'll probably have conversations about in the future or either talk about. There are in these places. I think about the stand that Dave Chappelle made, and one as well that went through a lot of those things, but how he got to the realm of, okay, I'm gonna come out of this for a minute. I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna articulate my thing, get my thing together. I'm gonna go back and battle. Now, he had to come back to Netflix and they fixed up things, and now he's owner of things. You know what I mean? So there's
Absolutely.
places where you have to be a smarter one, because they say we as minorities work harder. We've taught that anyway, to work harder, to work longer, to work more than our counterparts. So that's why I can tell you off the bat, I don't care what leadership role they're in, they're not smarter than me because they don't have the work ethic that I have. And that ain't no
Absolutely.
slight on them. That's just like, I know where I was raised. If
Absolutely.
I came home with an A, that wasn't good enough. And the A is best you can get, right? So
Right.
I came home with an A. Dad was like, it was no extra credit, was nothing else going on. That let me know right there, I got a substance and I got a standard that's above anything that anyone can put me in. So I have to be the smarter guy and say, okay, yeah, you guys made me this here and that other company, Boosil. No, I know I'm pronouncing their name wrong, but the company that he had the clothing line with, like, there's no other African American designers on that clothing line.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you're a trailblazer in that. So how do you handle that? How do you be a steward of that? You're like,
exactly.
yo, I'm gonna see who I can bring on with this. Maybe I can give me some black designers. A lot of kids out here trying to design clothes and be, that kind of thing. You can scoop them up. Let me start something with their name on it, where it could be a workshops or trade schools or something where I can bring my kids in or my people in. You have to be smart like that and look at those avenues for you.
And I agree with you 100%, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show, is because, like I said, now my YouTube timeline gets suggestions get filled with all these other, um, I would say, people who want to continue to talk about hatred and division, because
Hmm.
now it's like creating an atmosphere as us against them.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like hate never produces anything of positiveness
Now,
or anything of value, right? Only love does. And to me, energy, and I'm a proponent and advocate of why, Einstein laid out that in everything is energy is everything. And when you realize that you really only have a finite source of energy in you, and the older you get, the energy dissipates. Why put your energy into talking about how we got to now check the Jewish community on who was the original person and who was the original Jew and all that, and get into that conversation? And to me, it's, well, if we win that, what do we gain? Right? So if the Jewish community says, okay, the European Jewish community comes and says, okay, you're right, you're the original Jew. What does that change about us at all as a people? Does it automatically mean that we get a windfall of cash? Does it eliminate racial injustice and bias? It's like, so why put our efforts into those kind of conversations? Where I'm going with this, we need to be talking about how constructively we can now begin to look at how we can leverage the skills and talents that we have to better our communities. So Kanye was Ye was a multi-billionaire by his own words. He was the richest black man in America by his own definition. And my question is, what did you do with that capital? Did you come into the communities in the inner city? You talk about being Chicago. I'm from St. Louis. We know that most predominantly black inner city communities all suffer from the same systematic racial oppression. So I'm sure there's tons of blighted properties. I know that's in Chicago. There's in our community, we don't own any of the commerce in our community. That's typical, that's systematic, that's set up. What are you doing to change that dynamic? Right? You talking about how you were trying to open up more Yeezy stores in Atlanta, and you were barred from doing that, and that's how you feel that you have been held back. Who wants another store of an expensive tennis shoe in a community where people either they shouldn't be trying to buy because it's not going to bring them any tangible value? It's not like you buy it and the value goes up, and you can sell it. And so where I'm going with this is that's the interest that I wanted to bring to this conversation is we got to begin to start using our energy in a much more positive, progressive manner to change our communities. Because what I hate to constantly keep saying in my timeline, and I'm in Baltimore City, where 1 minute we're arguing about how racial injustice is still holding us back and how we need to change things. And every single day I'm saying, like just yesterday, a 13-year-old girl was killed, or this our young men out on the corner doing squeegee work. See, what I'm saying is we need to be putting efforts towards changing those, because again, we only have so much energy. And
yeah.
that's where I'm really going with this, is that's how we need to be thinking. And that's a collective effort I want to be building with people. And final point I want to make on this is that, to you, what you said earlier about the Jewish community opening doors for us, I don't see how anybody can be a multi-billionaire and then say I'm the richest black man in America, and then on the other hand say I got cheated. you know, I want to get cheated like that. Let me get cheated by those people in that context, if that's how you feel, because if they put you through their connections, their relationships, and their social capital resources, put you in a position to become the richest black man in America, then how much money do you really want to make? If they making 100 million and you only made 100 billion and you made 10 billion, do you feel that's unfair? See, that's where I'm saying that if you don't look at the business from a 8 moves ahead context, you get caught up in that and you get driven by your ego. Your ego is always going to tell you, I deserve more. I deserve more. And I'm saying I disagree with that.
Yeah, oftentimes, even on my level, which is way beyond the billionaire range, right? I look at my level and I look at everything in the essence of Solomon, right? I always go back to the spiritual connotation or the Bible kind of connotation to keep me grounded. So I go back to that and I say, okay, with the things I've come into, with everything Solomon had, his true zeal was for being able to move in and out amongst the people. How can I be with everything I've had? I don't think of anywhere have I read in biblical or scripture that he asked for more things. He asked for wisdom. He
Right.
asked for understanding of the things he had. And I think a lot of times that get lost in the sauce, so to say, and rightfully so in some instances, because a lot of this is all of a sudden I have and that I didn't have before.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens a lot, the education piece or the piece that we should take in effect to say, oh, okay, so like the billionaire, right? The one that won, he haven't even come out yet, but how they tell you when you win the lotto and you win those big billions, don't just come out talking about, yeah, I'm the winner, right? They kind of
Right.
even the lottery people kind of give you a guideline to say, yo, get your little attorney, get your little financial, get all that out. Then we announce who the winners is. They got the mindset to understand. I just can't come out and say I just won the lotto and it's $1 billion.
Right.
And you know what I mean? So this we have to also take it that stewardship. When you'll get an understanding of saying, okay, this mega corporation through my relationships, right? This is we discard relationships as just like hanging things out to dry. Before we even knew about Kanye West, before you were even able to change your name to the one syllable of yay, right? There were some relationships made that got you to the point of you was on sleeping on your buddy's couch in Chicago making beats, all the way to all you are now, where someone's buying shoes with your name. There was relationships built along those ways, right? So
Right.
those were avenues that you had to garner strength and foundation on your way up the ladder. But see, oftentimes we get into that point, but I came from the hood, I ain't had nothing. So I'm gonna buy everything. Let me get 20 cars. You know, we get the I call it, and I hate to talk about my boy, but I gotta say it because it's history. Now I get the MC Hammer effect, right?
Right.
So I'm just gonna employ the whole neighborhood, right? And ain't none of us went nowhere, ain't none of us understood nothing, ain't none of us know nothing about business. At one point in time, do I bring in somebody to say, yo, I might need somebody to kind of structure this for me? You know what I mean? Until I learn enough to structure it myself. You know, and those avenues is what we oftentimes say that the Jewish community has really provided to us, right? Most of the time, when you look at them in the way that they move, they're moving in law, they moving in the legal, they moving in the money. You know what I mean? So they're in those avenues that we do need partnerships. We do need to get in those doors. If we're going to make changes, we do need to get in those doors. So for me to cut that off, that's like me walking halfway around across the bridge and then I turn around and set fire to the other half.
Absolutely.
You know what sense does that make? And who's going to gain, right? If I can go write this book and say I'm an original Black Jew, and I'm sure there's a couple of them out there that I've read, give you the lineage and everything, you know, through scripture, through knowledge, through research. They give you the lineage of, you know, the Black man and this and walk it all the way through, right? What is that gaining to me at this point in time? Say I'm an original Black Jew. Does that afford me more luxury in life?
Exactly.
Does that
Exactly.
afford me more avenues of which I can bring people forward? Does this give me another opportunity for me to make changes? No, because we get into this debate of knowledge, debate of, yeah, I know where we come from. Yeah, but what are we doing now? We're
Exactly.
killing each other in the streets. The crime rate is up. Gun violence is high. So if we're so smart and our thoughts is to prove how smart we are, who we link to, and where it all began, what about where we are now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, the third commandment of spiritual capitalism is dare to love and numbers will follow. Again, dare to love and the numbers will follow. So again, if you build your movement off love, you build your business off love, numbers will follow. It means not just financial numbers and the money that you're going to make, but the impact that you're going to have on people's lives. The
Yeah.
employees that you hire, your stakeholders, they're all going to benefit from that love that you create. And that's what we're advocating here. You know, I see young brothers when I walk around Baltimore City, particularly around the harbor. I see the Hebrew Israelites, the brothers from the Noble Drew Ali movement. They're out there, you know, with their microphone and they're chanting, you know, with their, you know, advocacy and quoting the Bible. And they want to prove the point that, again, to what you're saying, we're the original Hebrew. But again, my question is, you got 13 or 14 black men out there shouting, advocating that intellect. And I appreciate you're not on the corner doing drugs, but brothers, how can you begin change that energy into looking at how you can begin to control and buy a block, own that block of properties, and then start collectively talking about those things? That's what I'm advocating. Beginning to just go out here and just say, I want to check the world and let the world know who was the original black man. It's like understanding that, yes, African was the original man. I believe that to my heart and soul. Can
Yes,
nobody tell me anything different, right?
absolutely.
Now, what it does for me, though, is it instills in me that I can achieve whatever I put my mind to, right? And I begin to move in that kind of energy, that kind of collective uh, activities, because I want to bring over $1 billion to city development so we can begin to buy blocks and improve the community. And I work on those efforts and I align myself with everybody who's in alignment with that. Because let me share this with you real quick, because I really want to make sure people get this. I think we spend a lot of time in the community, not just us as black people, but I think our society does this. They focus on looking for who you have things in common with, and everything's like, you got this in common with somebody. You need to meet this person, got this in common. And even romantic relationships get built off having things in common. And what I'm
Yes,
telling folks, that's the big mistake that we make. Having things in common doesn't really bring anything of value. What you really want to look for is what we have an alignment with, because
yes,
alignment is more intrinsic and common is more external. And I just make this point real quick. I can meet a brother next door to me, and what we have in common is the color of our skin, our age, and we may drink alcohol, where that's what we have in common. That might be the reason we get together and start talking. But then I find out that the reason we drink it in common, the reason we drink is he drinks because he wants to mask the pain and the trauma of growing up in a marginally oppressed city as Baltimore and what it's done to him, and maybe lost a brother in jail or lost a brother to drugs or senseless violence. And I may drink strictly for the sole purpose of the social aspect. I just want to drink every now and then while I'm having a conversation. And since we're not in alignment with how why we drink, eventually that's going to cause a problem, right?
yes,
And that's what I'm talking about, the importance of alignment. And that's what I'm looking to build with. So if a person is Jewish, I want to build with you if you're in alignment with me. If a person is Latinx, I want to build with you if you're in alignment with me. If your person is white descendant, I want to build with you if you're in alignment with me. And if you're black and you're not in alignment with me, then I have no interest in building with you. That's just how I look at things as the person I am.
yeah, and those are the things that to that, and I find that to be so as well. I don't look for very seldom do I look for the similarities when I'm networking or I'm dealing with people.
Mm,
I'm very seldom. And do we align with things? I definitely want the alignment, but the similarities. In you brought up a great point of the black. You know, I'm aligned with you because I'm black. I can be fathers for the truth. No one black individual speaks for all black people, and vice versa for any other ethnicity as well. It should be the same thing if it's not said or thought to be that way. Now we can be in alignment. We can be in alignment on a lot of things, and we can also be not aligned in a lot of things. You know, those opportunities arise as well. But if I see that you got some thoughts on me, and I'm always thinking 7, 8 moves ahead, so your 1 or 2 thoughts that you've gotten, I probably already thought about them, and I'm like up the road a bit. Not that I'm just so much smarter; it's just that that's how my mind works, right? So if
right,
I'm understanding how this goes, once you show me that piece, I'm already thinking about your piece further down. What is that
right,
piece going to present me down here to make me use it right here? And this
right.
is how I put things together. So when you're saying that alignment, that's very crucial. And I've come up in alignment with a lot of people on here that don't look like me, especially in LinkedIn. A lot of things that we align to, a lot of thoughts that we like, yo, you think that way? It's actually funny to think sometimes because you just look at people, you're like, man, I would have never thought you thought like that, right? Because that's what our mind says. That's
Absolutely.
those are stereotypes say, oh, you think like that? Yeah, I think like that. Man, I would have never thought that. Why? Just because you saw how I look and that just threw you all off the trail. So it has to be the communication piece of that. It has to be the conversation piece to that. And it has to be the vulnerable piece to that, which I always just say. If you let some people in, you'd be surprised how many people are like you. You really would.
Absolutely.
When you stop putting up the barriers to nonsense things such as I don't look like you, you're not in my circle, those kind of things that we ostracize each other with time in and time out. And we start looking at people from a perspective of, yo, this is how I feel about this. How you feel about it?
Exactly.
Inquire with people, get their understanding, get their take on it, get their perspective. And you might realize and say, shit, oh man, I mean, you've been at odds all this time. We've been thinking the same way for all these years. But why you don't know? You haven't had those conversations. And you can only have those conversations when you believe enough in yourself to say, wherever this goes, I'm good with it because it's who I am. We may talk and some hurtful things, maybe said some things or something like that. But what I can say is that I found out how you feel, and you told me what you think, and then that I can make my own decision and say, okay, well maybe I do want to work with this fella because we kind of feisty, but man, that put us in a think tank. Man, that made us brainstorm. Man, we got ideas now that we could be selling for millions. It all comes from the conversations, man, and that's what we're not having enough of, King.
You're absolutely right. The art of communication is one of the things that is not taught very well in school. People love to talk. Very few people know how to listen. And listen with the intent to understand. Again, one of the books that's written by a gentleman who I admire immensely. He's passed away, but his book is influential in my life. I read it every day, read from it every day. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. Stephen R. Covey was a Mormon by his religious faith, but he never said that in any of his writings. I found that out later, much later, after I read the book and really began to apply a lot of the principles he advocates, which is being principle-centered. He never talks about, now I know he had his Mormon influence helped him write it, but he also talked about how he studied 25 different religions and spirituality to come up with those 7 principles. Then another book that I read from and learn from that's written by a Jewish man who I highly admire and respect that's passed his way, as well as The Modern Man in Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. He talks about the importance of finding meaning to give you context in life, and it changes everything about life, and how he was able to suffer through the Holocaust, and because he had meaning, that was the only thing that kept him together. It wasn't the conquest of or the drive for power or money, it was love. And when you watch your families get ripped apart and killed and all your material things get taken, the only thing you have is your meaning there. And that's what I see lacking in our community as I walk through the streets in Baltimore, particularly the streets where I do real estate development and my business is. I see blocks of young Black men sitting on the corners every other block, and what's missing in their lives is meaning. And no matter what type of resource you can provide them, if you don't have meaning in your life, you're not going to see a connection on how to use that resource or how best to leverage that resource. And that's where we need to really be looking at helping people see meaning. And meaning can only come from having effective communication with people where you're willing to be, as you outline, vulnerable in that discussion and not have ego sit here and tell you, well, I know more, I'm better, there's nothing this person can tell me, I got everything all figured out. But sit back and be vulnerable and say, what is it can I learn from this individual right now, regardless of the color of their skin or their gender or even sexual orientation, a religious ideology or any religious dogma, political ideology, whatever it may be. Like I found myself, and I'll tell you just real quick on this point, when I first got into conscious capitalism back in 2012, I thought I knew everything. I had a lot of ego with me, and I began to study conscious capitalism. And then I helped fund or found the DC chapter of Conscious Capitalism, and that put me on the National Conscious Capitalism website. So if people wanted to find out more about the DC chapter, my name was a contact information, a contact name. A gentleman, a white man, reached out to me from South Africa and said he was coming to DC and he wanted to know if we can meet. He wanted to learn more about conscious capitalism, and he wanted to sit here and have a meeting with me. And my initial thoughts were, a white man from South Africa, I have no interest in wanting to meet him. Right? That became my initial thought, right? But when I met this gentleman, I realized, no, I claim to be a part of this movement. I said I'm committed to being a part of this movement. I'm going to meet this gentleman. That's what my responsibilities is, to being a leader, and I'm going to meet him on the strength of that. And we're going to see how things are going to go. I'm going to put my faith out there and see what I can learn and what can manifest from it. Come on to find out, this gentleman was not a part of the apartheid movement. He actually had fought, and his father had fought against apartheid. And he was truly a conscious gentleman who brought a lot of value and was an author. And to this day, him and I still discuss it. A great relationship was made from that. And see, that's where I'm going with this, is that we can't judge people by the color of their skin, by their religious ideology or dogma, by their political affiliation. I actually do more business now with people who are Republicans, and I was raised a Democrat. No longer do I affiliate with either party. I'm more independent in my thought and political ideology. But one point I'm going is, that's how we got to open up communications and dialogues, stop judging each other, and look for ways we align beyond these societal tribes that we're forced to be in.
Yeah, that's true, and it all goes with the understanding of what do I need, what is my purpose, right? And I think that's really. I was just thinking it as he was talking. He was saying, and he was covering so many things. The main thing was going in my mind that a lot of times we do things without understanding our purpose. And when I say our purpose, not the purpose of which we're doing what we're doing, but our purpose and why we're doing them.
Right.
Our understanding of who we are and why we're to this point. And a lot of it, yeah, we can go back through history, right? And that could cause some misunderstanding, some behaviors. It even puts us in some situations where they're not pleasing and they're not nice to be in, right? But I often go back to the thing that my dad used to tell me as a kid. He said, nobody can stop you from learning. And he said, that's what they tried to do to us as slaves, right? Is my great-grandfather was a slave. So a great-great-grandfather, two greats with that. So when you look back there, when they grew up on the farm or whatever, they was in Mississippi picking cotton and all those kind of things. And my dad worked on the farm. He wasn't a slave, but he worked on the farm because that's all they knew how to do up there until he got up to Chicago, right? And I look at those kind of avenues, and he told me the first thing he did when he came to Chicago, he started trying to read everything. It's like most people trying to just read, particular things that they got in school and stuff. He said he read everything from comic books to ebony magazines to Jets to anything, encyclopedias, dictionaries. He read everything, right? And the thing that he said to me that has left me kind of profound and articulate today was that once it's in here, no one can take it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get it in here, you can recreate all material, but you got to know how to do it. And this is where I think we fall. That's where I think we falling short in a lot of times. And we put so much stock in the game, but we don't put enough stock in the journey to get the game, right? Because if I'm learning that's why I never was worried about losing a job. I never was worried about these people say, "Oh, you're in all these temp places or whatever." I think at one point in time, when I moved from Charlotte back, went down to Charlotte. My wife had got her job, moved her down there. We was down there for a minute, and for the first year plus, I think I was with this temp agency. I think I had 7 assignments within that year plus time, and a lot of people was even the agency was like, "Oh my God, we seem like every time we try to place you somewhere, they're not, they don't hire whatever." I was like, "You can place me in a million places." I say, them 7 places I had to learn how to do 7 things that I didn't know.
Absolutely.
So you ain't do nothing but fortify my knowledge by sending me that. Of course, you look at it as the long run of what somebody gonna say. Oh man, been at that temp agency. I was with that temp agency almost 2 years before they landed me a permanent job. Right?
Absolutely.
So I wasn't complaining. They were, because they wanted to sign off on that and get that money for me as a client, right?
Absolutely.
I wasn't. Every company they sent me to, I got a notebook. I took notes. I did the job, whether it was something similar to what I knew how to do. I found a different way to do it. So that always has resonated with me. What you get up here, you keep. All you got to do is continue to understand how to use it. And I think this is what has failed us a lot of ways. We don't use the things that we kept, or either we use those things and try to hide pieces of it so others can't gain from it. And we're not in the sharing it. I'll say this, and I'll throw it back to you, King. I got quite a few different ethnicities in my little cul-de-sac here, right? Mm. And I see them going into and from the work and going and doing different things. But I see their togetherness. Now, don't get me wrong. I ain't in their households. I don't know who fighting who got things. But I see them when they come out to work. I got this guy got a landscaping business up there, and he got quite a few of his family members that work for him. Now, I hear them out there having these conversations, and they talk. They do corporations and building parks and all that. But when they come together working, Man, they together. I see one hop off with the riding thing. I see another one hop off with the weed whacker. I see another one hop off with the blower. Right? They all working in unison. I haven't been anywhere where I see our people do that. We don't operate in unison. It's
No,
always it's always like I'll bring my homie on, then my homie get too much, or I think he getting too much, he gotta go. Or I bring my family in and we can't, I'm your cuz, so why I gotta do all the work? We want favors, we want discounts, we want, you know what I mean? Our mentality is just crazy to think like that, man.
absolutely, man. That's why I advocate and I tell people that one of the services that I provide with my company, King Connections, is helping people to build what we call connectionally intelligent tribes. And what I mean by that is building a tribe that you intentionally strategy and go through the process of identifying people who you have alignment with, other folks who are conscious leaders, because your family and your friends and people maybe who live in your close environment, even though again you may have things in common, but they're not going to be in alignment. And because they're not in alignment, you won't get along. That's why people tell you the worst people to do business with is family, right? Because you got things in common, such as blood, such as names, such as siblings and things of that nature, but your alignment is totally off. And it could be with your brother, it could be with your cousin, it could be with anyone else. And so for me, I've made more progress in my life by making relationships and building relationships with folks who didn't look like me, who didn't sound like me, who didn't grow up with the same cultural ideology that I grew up with, but we grew toward the same path because we were committed to such things as personal growth. We were committed to certain things such as doing things with love, of wanting to fight injustice. And that's what brought us together. Like, when we began to talk about, again, I got to go back to make this point about alienating or us versus the Jewish community. Again, what it shows is for every time somebody can bring up to me an example, and I've heard them all, of folks who point out, well, there was Jews who benefited from slavery. There was Jewish owners. And I'm like, okay, well, let me tell you about one of the greatest Jewish men that we all admire to this day, Albert Einstein. When Albert Einstein came to this country, he was already known as one of the smartest men on the planet. And he had an opportunity to go speak at Harvard and Yale. And what did he chose to go speak at? A black small college called Lincoln University. He was an avid supporter or avid advocate against racism. And he wanted to teach these black students because he recognized that those black students would never get access to the kind of education that he could bring and the kind of lessons he can teach. And that's lost in history, right? And then we can talk about other things that great Jewish men have done. So for each instance of pointing out, that's why I said you can't generalize and say an entire race of people. You can point out to individual Jewish men that you may have done business with that may have done you wrong or mistreated you, but you can't generalize the whole population no more than they can generalize our whole entire race of people saying we're all criminals and thugs and drug dealers. You know what I'm saying? And that's when you make those wrong, silly, ignorant generalizations that does nothing for the conversation but offend people and turn people off. Like, I'm reading some books that help inspire and lift me up, and that's the path I want to be on. And I want to bring this home by really saying this, that in today's world where the media is doing its best, the corporations, that is, and that's where you brought up Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle recognized that it was the corporations that was holding them back. It wasn't Jewish community, right? Now, some of those corporations may be ran by Jewish men, some may not be ran by Jewish men, but he recognized it's a corporation that was Comedy Central that was holding him back and denying him access to the Capitol based on his show, Dave Chappelle's show, and trying to distribute it on all these streaming sites and not give him his residuals. And what did he do? He made a show that he put on YouTube, called out his tribe of people who believed in him and said, listen, don't support Comedy Central. If you see my name on my show on HBO, Amazon, or any other platform, do not watch it. Don't support it. And eventually, Netflix stood with him. Netflix said, we're not going to even run your show on Netflix until you get things worked out where you're getting your proper cut from the Dave Chappelle show. And eventually Comedy Central had to cave in, not because he called out an entire race of people, because he was strategic with his actions. And now when you watch Dave Chappelle on any of these platforms, you know that he's going to cut from that. And then you have people like Howlin' Wolf back in, the day. He was quick to tell them, listen, don't come to me, offer me cars and houses. Just give me my residuals. Ray Charles was blind. And Ray Charles was able to tell him, listen, I want my masters. Oh, I ain't singing a note. So, and he was able to get his masters. See, that's where I'm saying that it's up to you to have the competence to articulate what your position is and even hold out to get your position once you are clear on what your value is. It's not to sit here and say, I expect this other person to treat me fairly. That's the mistake that people got to learn. Capitalism doesn't work that way. Now, you can kind of get that within spiritual capitalism by building with people you have alignment with, but you can't just jump into any negotiation of business and expect because anybody happens to be any color or any religious ideology or dogma, think that they're going to treat you fair or fair in your mind.
Yeah, and it's not going to happen like that. And I think we've all heard that even as growing up as kids, right? The world ain't fair, life ain't fair. So some things that happen for you. So that's why I never look at things in that through those lens. That what's going on to me work for me, right? I don't even look at that as you work harder, because they have a lot of these little cliches things that I think is really for humanity's sakes want to make you feel better, right? You work harder. You achieve more, you get more. No, I'm working with a lot of people right now that haven't worked as hard as I'm working, but they've been in a place to receive more than I've received. Absolutely. So that let me know right there that it's not fair, right? I work in, especially in what I do and work in. I've seen some some of their dads and stuff was the heads of things, and they're in there, and they ain't have go to school, they ain't have study, but now they got these positions of power. Right. So life ain't fair. So what I'm going to do, sit around and all day and sulk in what's going on with them? Or am I going to make ways and be a little bit of genius of my own right and say, okay, yeah, they did do that. They bypassed these kind of things. But you know what? It's only going to hurt them in the end because they don't know these things. So they're only going to go so far with what they know. So what I'll do, I prepare myself for when that time comes. Or I prepare myself to make ways for my own self, in which we're doing now with the consulting firm. I'm not looking to get back by those ones that want to push me out. I'm going in now and I'm going to these meetings myself, explaining where we are, what we're coming from, what we're trying to do, these kind of things. I'm not looking for the calls and sitting back and waiting on B2B to get me some appointments or some leads. You know what I mean? Sometimes you have to take these things into your own hands and see how your destiny goes. Because a lot of times we sit back and we want others to create our destiny. That's what not capitalism is about. Capitalism ain't about, you handed me my destiny, and then I just get to sit back on the island and cross my feet. You got to put the work in. You got to put the time in. You got to be ingenuity about things. You got to have a wherewithal with yourself. You got to have a skin. You got to be tough about some things. There's so much involved in that, man. And when you go from that perspective of us being African American men here talking about this subject, we can't afford. Or are we afforded the opportunity for us to move our emotions?
No.
It's just a suicide. It's just a suicide note for us. That's really what it is.
Absolutely.
I can't go in my corporate office and get angry. You want to see security come off them elevators right quick?
Absolutely.
I can't afford that, nor am I afforded that space to do that. So in essence of that, I have to learn how can I move in this game? It's like remind me a lot of Tom and Jerry, right? Tom knew he couldn't do anything with Jerry knew he couldn't do anything with Tom. Tom big cat, you know what I mean? In one swipe, he got me.
Right.
But Jerry was all the time thinking of ways to outdo Tom, thinking of ways of how to get around Tom. That's why my mind works all day. All right, no, I don't have my name ain't big corporate. I did that when I started, not attack, I don't want to use that term. I don't want nobody to come back and bite me. When I started thinking about how did Brene Brown make her way? How did she make her bones? And I started doing some research. It's like, oh, okay, she asked a lot of questions. Did interviews with people. Like, she didn't say nothing about how she lived through vulnerability. She didn't say one thing about how it affected her life. I said, that's my doorway. I'm going to tell people what vulnerability did for me, how I was once one way and I thought about it, and I exposed people to that area and how I grew. how I got opportunities. See, that's the way I looked at it. And I was like, okay, Brene, you got your little lane and I got mine. We both talking about vulnerability and leadership. We both talking about the same things. I'm telling you from a live perspective. She's telling you from I done sat down and talked to somebody perspective. So,
Right.
these are the ways that we have to move. And that's what it's about, man. And spiritual capitalism goes more in depth to how you move spiritually in these matters. What are the stewardship you're taking in these matters? Because a lot of times we
Absolutely.
want things for gain, but who are you helping? You know what I mean? Who are you bringing along with you? That's the spiritual part of that. Who are you helping to grow as you learn? Are you sharing those experiences with those that's in your circle? Are you guiding people, taking people under your wing? Like these things, I think sometimes we forget that some of these things are part of all of our growth.
Absolutely. And to that point, as we get to the top of the hour, what I
Mm,
want to let folks know is one of the things you and I are co-creating on, and that's what I'm
yes.
advocating. You and I met on LinkedIn, and we got connected through a conscious movement, and
Hmm.
we saw alignment, things we had in alignment. We decided to say, listen, let's work together. Let's create some course content. Let's put some information out there. And that's what I'm advocating now is, listen, let's stop trying to point out all the problems that's wrong in the world,
Absolutely.
but let's bring solutions to the problems and begin to co-create to create a better place. And one of the issues that I've seen as a Black business owner, as a Black real estate developer coming up in Baltimore and any city is the access to capital, the access to resources. Now I've seen the games that these banks play where the system, that you say, they shut us out.
Hmm.
So to get around that, said we're going to create a conscious fund, and we're going to create a fund for conscious leaders, people who want to develop a spiritual capitalist mindset. And in doing so, I realized I can't do that alone. So I
Hmm.
have to reach out and connect with other conscious leaders who provide great content. And when I met you and you were talking about your course on vulnerability, I said, that's a great course to be a part of what I'm building. And so we're going to be launching your course on the platform that I'm building out, starting in around December 1st time frame, a little bit later, but we're going to have the information on our websites where they
Yes.
can take your course and get your coaching, because I see the work that you do. I see the grind that you put yourself through. I see the connections that you have. I've been on the panel discussion with you, and the work you're doing about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think is something that needs to be explained. But more importantly, I think people need to understand that if you're really going to do things with love, which is the
That's
third principle, third commandment of spiritual capitalism, you got to be vulnerable in that pursuit.
that's
So
the
why don't you
key.
talk a little bit about your course, before we get it, top of the hour reach, give people a
Yeah,
little idea.
vulnerability and leadership, vulnerability to superpower is the course, right? We're going to take you through some modules, and we're going to take you everything from getting in touch with it. Maybe you haven't been programmed a model to even understand what vulnerability is. Maybe you've been programmed or subjected to this is what vulnerability is. So we're going to break it down from there. Giving you the dictionary version of it from the beginners section. We got the beginners part in there where we're going to just really walk through it. What is vulnerability? How can I identify it? How in ways that I can understand what it truly is and what it is to me. And we're going to move on up that level and go to the building front. How can I get to this place of where I can use it strategically and intentionally to understand my movements, to understand in building relationships, and understand the conscious awareness that I need to have to understand when I can be and when I'm not can be. And then moving on up to the professional level where I go and deal with the C-suiters and I go and deal with the corporate, and I understand and give you understanding of how to lead vulnerability and leadership for those that you're leading, for those that you're actually in charge of, how the opportunity there is so great for you to mold greatness, right? Not only with your knowledge and skill base, but also with your understanding, empathy, and what it takes for them to move and grow. That's true leadership. You know what I mean? Not those, and I'm definitely working in that area upon those leaders who think that 10 steps for something to be done and you only share 8 because you want to hold 2 back for yourself, thinking somebody's going to take your job. You'd be surprised if you show somebody those 10 steps, how they'll make your job easier to do because you've given them those responsibilities. A lot of people going out here on these jobs, they want to be there. They want to work those jobs. They're excited about it. I mean, you have a few that just pick a job because they need to get paid. But when you're getting up in that leadership, that corporate ladder like that, people are genuinely want to do well in those positions. And how can you have them do that. You as the leader understand the growth that they need. Be sympathetic and empathetic to what they need to help them grow and move, because it's only going to bring the dividends back to you. It's only going to bring it back to you. So we walk it through there in 6 modules on there. We're getting it together for you. We're getting it tight and getting it ready to move out so you guys can go. We're going to set up some pre-launch information and send that out, start making some posts and things about that so you guys can make yourself available to that. And it's at every level. So it's from all the way from the beginning where you don't know what I'm talking about, you want to learn, all the way up to, I think I know a little bit, let me see how I can do this, all the way up to how can I get my teams to be like this? How can I get my departments to be like this and think like that? So we're going to carry you all the way through the journey.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, brother. And thank you for your investment of time and energy joining today. Look forward to building with you going forward. Yes. This is what I advocate, folks. Connect with intent. Connect with the intent to create something greater than you can do on your own. And if you will allow yourself to function within the 10 commandments of spiritual capitalism, you can attract the people who are going to be in line with who you are. And this is a classic example. So I want to thank Mr. Carl Shawn-Watkins, Mr. Vulnerability, for joining me today. Looking forward to building with you, brother. I think your course is going to be a great course. I'm going to sign up for it, and you get more information on his course and our launch date shortly. I would say definitely look for a December 5th or 7th launch date, and we're going to have that information out there for you, folks. We're advocating change and improving your lives, not holding you back, and never playing the victim role. So listening audience, thank you all for listening to this show, this episode of the Spiritual Capitalist Show. Until our next episode, I want to wish everyone a blessed and productive day.
Absolutely. You guys take care now.